My name is Bettina Keller. I work for Scapos. Scapos is a partner in FF4EuroHPC and was also involved in the previous Fortissimo experiments, mainly dealing with the open call evaluation. Jessica Juno from HLRS and me will moderate this webinar for you today. Jessica is, like myself, part of the project management team of FF4EuroHPC. So first, let me start with some remarks. We will record this webinar. Please note this, however, your names will not be visible on the video. Later, we will put the video on our website, and we will have a Q&A session after all presentations are finished. So please keep your microphones muted until then, and this Q&A session will not be recorded. So only the 4 presentations will be recorded. So I hope this is okay for everybody. Now let's take a short look at the agenda before we are starting. The first 2 talks will give a short overview about the current activities ranging from FF4EuroHPC via the former Fortissimo experiments to EuroCC and Castiel. Then there will be the presentation of a success story from the former Fortissimo experiments, which will be held by Sam Ward. It shows the cyber success story. And last but not least, Tomi from Arctur will give you a lot of details about the current open call of FF4EuroHPC. This will include all details about how to participate in this open call. So let's start with the first presentation, which was originally scheduled to be given by Dr. Bastian Koller from HLRS. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it today, so Jessica is standing in for him. Jessica will present you will give the presentation called Boosting Industrial Usage of HPC Plus with Business Experiments and National Competence Centres. In this presentation, she will present the different European activities, FF4EuroHPC, EuroCC and Castiel, and she will show how these activities can help with the uptake of HPC Plus, and HPC Plus is standing for the combination of high performance computing, high performance data analytics and artificial intelligence. So Jessica, please start with your presentation.
Jessica, you're muted.
Oh, yes, sorry, I just noticed. So, thank you, Guy. Okay, so I start right away. Again, hi everybody from me as well. So as Bettina already mentioned, both of us are part of the project management team of FF4EuroHPC. Welcome everybody to this first general workshop. I will then start right away with the first question that interests small and medium-sized enterprises or businesses in general. Why should we use HPC in business? Well, there is a simple answer, and it is that high-performance computing, high-performance data analytics, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, all these technologies are becoming more and more indispensable, more so in the Industry 4.0. So all the current digital revolution that is driven by data and intelligence builds on these tools. That meaning that this increasingly complex, connected and digitalized world creates a flood of data. So we have a lot of data that we need to analyze and somehow make sense out of it. And HPC or high performance computing and the new technologies allow us exactly that, to generate meaning and knowledge from the data. And that, of course, would help us to better products, having better models and processes in virtually all applications. So how these advanced HPC services can enable European companies to focus on quality and innovation, and thus they can also enable us to prosper in the global marketplace and also, of course, make us more competitive. Let's say the European market is not the first to see that these tools are becoming more and more indispensable. Many industrialized economies, both already developed and developing, have identified HPC as a key tool for innovation. Here's just an example. Here's the American phrase, to outcompute is to outcompete. And it has been used to make the case to the government as well. Next, I would just like to give you a few facts, let's say, about why we should use HPC in business. Following the Council of Competitiveness survey, we have, I think, in my opinion, the most important figure, which is right here. 24% of the people that participated in the survey stated that the use of HPC reduces the time to solution. So we have a time benefit here. The next most important aspect is the inability to solve the problem by any other means, meaning that HPC is the one tool that can solve the problems related to their businesses. And the third number here, you can see it, is, there it is return on investment, which lies at 19% and is then the third most important reason for people to use HPC in their businesses. Talking about all these activities or developments, we now will have a look at the national and European levels. So what are there for activities? What is happening on both levels? Let's start with the national level. HPC Plus, meaning HPC and all its associated technologies, has a lot of impact on the national level as well. We have a lot of ongoing activities in different nations. But of course, the depth and the maturity activities depend on the national strategy. So on the national level, we'll have the infrastructure, applications, training, research, and knowledge, all the aspects that concerns the national level. We have their activities going on how to adapt HPC in all these processes. Similar on the European activities, we have a lot of interaction between national activities and European activities, but of course not all can participate or all nations are involved. It depends on the projects and also on the nations themselves and their national strategy. However, the European level as well focuses on infrastructure, European research, technology platforms, strategic activities, etc. So everybody is trying to pick up HPC in their activities. One big project from the European Commission that started in September of this year is the EuroHPC. And what EuroHPC is trying to do is to set up so-called national competence centers, so on a national level. The mission here is to take into account that all the participating countries or nations have different levels of maturity and activities. To be able to address these different levels, there will be the first phase of the structure, meaning that we need to implement a framework that allows for better overview and management of the overall activities and to set up the necessary frame for the implementation of the NCCs. So each of these participating nations has its own level of maturity and activities. And for us at EuroHPC, it is important to start with a structure that addresses all of those nations and their levels of maturity. What should we focusing on? Well, in the design phase of EuroHPC, we identified commonalities in terms of main topics to address. These are training and skills development, technology transfer and business development, industrial collaboration, competence mapping, facilitation of access to scientific and technical expertise and knowledge pools, as well as awareness creation. As you can see, all these topics are related and they are also necessary. If we can map where the competences are in each nation, then we'll know what training is needed. We can see which nations have already very well developed business development or industrial collaboration and which ones would need a bit more training and help on that side. So here's the structure of an NCC. Ideally, we'll have the NCC in the center, and it will be influenced, of course, by the national software developers, by HPC plus experts, national resource providers, etc. But of course, it will start with the competence mapping to see, as I mentioned, what services we need to offer the country. And as you can see from the outside, let's say we have science, society, politics, and industry who are all contributing. So we are mapping, let's say, the HPC competences for the whole nation, and then we are adapting our trainings accordingly. Just some facts and figures about the EuroHPC. As I mentioned, it started in September, 1st of September of this year. It is a research and innovation action, and it will last for 2 years. We have 36 main participants, but 33 nations. We have already a website which is online. We are also present on the social media, so we have a LinkedIn and a Twitter account. And as you can see from the map here on the right, it basically is a pan-European project. To maximize synergies, the European Commission planned another project. It is basically a support project to EuroHPC, hence also the coordination and support action name. It is called Castiel, and it is also coordinated by the same team as EuroHPC. So EuroHPC, Castiel, and FF4EuroHPC are coordinated by one coordination organization, and it's called HLRS. What we're trying to do in Castiel is we want to focus on the support of the national competence centers in different topics of interest, meaning that we created working groups that are working on common topics of interest. So we are focusing on training, twinning, and mentoring, industrial interaction and business development, and also on awareness creation and outreach. As mentioned earlier, we chose topics that would be interesting for all the national competence centers, and which all national competence centers could profit from. We are trying to elaborate on best practices to strengthen the NCCs as well, and of course we're trying to enable them to have access to knowledge, expertise, and success stories. Castiel is, as I mentioned, the coordination and support action. This project also started in September 2020 and will also run for 24 months. As you can see, again, we have a social media presence. We have also already the website online. It is coordinated by HLRS, and our main partners are Arctur, Ceska, TerraTech, and Cineca. This little graph here on the right-hand side shows that each nation, each participating nation in the EuroHPC project, here represented by the NCCs, will be supported by the working groups of Castiel, which are over here. And those are the 3 main aspects that we wanted to focus on, and that would also help each of the NCCs. So how does all this fit together? Like mentioned, the EuroHPC project takes place on the national level. So each of the national competence centers is situated, let's say, on the national platform. Castiel, as the support action to that, lifts all these activities to European level, where we have already a lot of other activities and projects concerning HPC, like Focus COE or PRAISE, for example. And this is also where FF4EuroHPC is situated. So it is already on the European level, it acts on the European level. And this is also the main topic of today, let's say. Diving right into FF4EuroHPC. FF4EuroHPC had 2 prior projects, which were Fortissimo and Fortissimo 2. We executed their 92 experiments and were able to generate 79 impressive business-oriented success stories. The central team of Fortissimo and also of FF4EuroHPC is the successful execution of experiments with small and medium-sized enterprises, which deliver real business impact through HPC. How do we choose these experiments or the small and medium-sized enterprises? Well, we do so by open calls for proposals. What is the goal of FF4EuroHPC? We want to successfully extend and continue the mission of Fortissimo and Fortissimo 2. We want also to increase the innovation potential of industry, but in particular of small and medium-sized enterprises, using advanced high-performance computing infrastructures, applications, and services. We want to provide access to HPC-based infrastructures and services to a wide range of users, So we are not narrowing it down to a specific area, but we want a wide range of users for new or emerging data and compute intensive applications and services. We want to foster wider innovations, for example, by exchanging and promoting best practices, best practice use cases or application experiments. We can do so by achieving a portfolio of business-oriented applications, which are called these experiments, that are driven by small and medium-sized end users' needs. We want also to provide an effective mechanism for inclusion of innovative and agile small and medium-sized enterprises, lowering the barriers for small actors to enter the market and exploit new business opportunities. So we don't want only the big player, let's say, to participate, but really the small and medium-sized enterprises. And to link all of the projects together, we want to support and also to collaborate with the future national HPC Competence Centres. To conclude, obviously, we have seen that a lot of activities are going on both on the national and the European level concerning HPC+. And we're talking not only about the competences in terms of technology, but also, for example, in terms of interaction with potential users like industry. EuroHPC and Castiel both start to explore synergies and to support knowledge and experience transfer in Europe. And FF4EuroHPC in all of these activities serves as a booster for exploring further potentials for the use of HPC+ by industry. Oh, okay. So I'm at the end of my presentation already. Thank you very much for your attention. I think we are going to start with the next presentation, but please do note down your questions in the chat if you have any for me, and then at the end of the webinar, we can address all of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, for the informative presentation, and thank you for being so spontaneous and standing in for Bastian. As Jessica said, please keep your questions in mind. We will have the big Q&A session after all 4 presentations have been concluded. The next talk will be given by Professor Mark Parsons. He is the director of the EPCC, which is the Supercomputing Centre at the University of Edinburgh. And his talk has the title HPC for SMEs, Getting the Benefits of HPC, HPDA and AI. This talk will focus on the Fortissimo idea and on the 2 previous Fortissimo projects. Over the past 7 years, Fortissimo has shown that it is possible for SMEs to gain real business benefits through HPC plus adoption. And the Fortissimo projects have shown that it's particularly important that the SMEs are supported when they are starting to use these cutting-edge technologies. This talk will now explain how best to deliver these benefits into your business. So please, Mark, you can start with your talk.
Great. So thank you very much for asking me to talk. Before Brexit happened, I led the Fortissimo project and the Fortissimo 2 project, and thank you very much for asking me to speak today. I think Fortissimo for EuroHPC is a great next step along the Fortissimo story. So I really wanted to focus in this talk on my experience, working in EPCC for 30 years, well, in fact 26 of its 30 years, and how Fortissimo came about, why I've always felt the Fortissimo model was very important, and to give some examples of some of the projects that we've done over the years. And of course, you're going to hear a much more detailed discussion of one of these success stories, one of the experiments from Zyba after I speak. So I think it's very clear, and this is true of the last 5 years as much as any time over the last 10 or 20 years, the supercomputing centres, HPC centres, are really changing at the moment. So while even 5 years ago, we were very focused on high performance computing, on modelling and simulation predominantly, I think in the last 5 to 8 years, we've really moved into a much broader set of activities that focus not just on traditional modelling and simulation, but also bringing in many more data-focused projects, data science projects, data analytics, and most recently AI, or the applications of AI to business problems and to scientific problems. So I think supercomputing centres at a national and regional level are changing to accommodate these new opportunities, and that's a key part of FF4EuroHPC, that it's growing into the AI space. What we saw with the Fortissimo 2 project was that with the original Fortissimo project, it focused entirely on supercomputing modelling and simulation. With Fortissimo 2, we also included high-performance data analytics, and a number of experiments are very successful in that regard. I think one of the things that's really important that I get asked about a lot is, why should supercomputing centres, both at a national and regional level, engage in going out and working with industry? And my argument is always this, that governments invest large amounts of money in supercomputing centres. Universities and research centres invest a lot in these centres. And you can see here, this is a picture of the computer room I'm just opening at the moment. Opens in a week's time. That's £20 million just for the room, a new power supply. The computer that's going to be installed initially is £48 million investment by the UK government. So these are very large amounts of investment by government. And it's always been the case that I've believed that our local economy, so in my case, being based in Scotland, I view that as Scotland first, then the UK, and more generally Europe. But locally, I feel we have a really important role in supporting our local industries and our local commercial companies that want to take advantage of the sort of facilities we have. Now, that doesn't mean that they get it for free. We do many collaborative research projects where that's part of the project, but many companies also want to use our infrastructure for production purposes, and we've focused on that over the last 20 or more years, and that model has worked really, really well, and Fortissimo allowed us to hugely grow that activity. So while we've got some really large systems, the new system we're just installing at the moment, Archer 2, is very similar to the Hawk system, HLRS. They're about the same size, 750,000 cores, and the same processor technology. What we found over the years actually is most companies don't want to run on these extremely large systems. They can, but quite often it's difficult to use these systems with companies, partly because companies may want specific bits of software installed on them, they may want changes to the way the systems are run. And certainly in my case, it's difficult for us to make these sort of changes on the national high-performance computing service because it's not governed by us, it's governed by the government at the end of the day. So in about 8 years ago, we first started buying systems, a system which is called Indy originally, specifically for industry to use. And in 2016-17, we bought the most recent industry system, which is called Cirrus, which has got about 13,000 Intel cores. And this year, I added 152 NVIDIA V100 GPUs. So this is not a particularly large system, but it provides the sort of resource that we find many companies want to use. Part of what I'm allowed to do, and this isn't true of all HPC centres in Europe, but I'm encouraged to offer it as a commercial service to industry, provided I don't undercut the market. And we do that. And so this year we've had over 70 companies that have taken advantage of that and have simply bought time in the system. And I think that's an important thing that both Fortissimo projects have done to date, which is to encourage more HPC centres to engage in this sort of activity, which I think is really important for a local economy. So you can see the sort of projects that EPCC works in, and they range from very, very large projects, I'll describe one in a second, to much smaller projects with local SMEs. And it can involve banks, for example, it can involve car manufacturers, it can involve public sector as well. I mean, I think that's one of the important things to say is we always think about industry use of HPC and HPDA as purely being limited to companies. But remember, in many of our economies, 40–50% of the economy is public sector, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be helping the public sector to innovate as well. So the sort of standard activities that we do, our bread and butter has always been numerical modelling and simulation, helping organisations, both academic and commercial, to use that, help people rewrite their codes they run on systems. But then over the last 5 or more years, we've started doing more and more projects in the data science space, lots of data analytics, cloud computing, lots of machine learning, deep learning type projects, which are growing a lot at the moment. So I think you'll find across Europe that most HPC centres have a similar set of activities that they engage with companies on. At the very top end, and this is what governments tend to think of as the engagement of big companies with supercomputing centres. This is a project I have in the UK with Rolls-Royce, the Aero Engines company, and a 5-year programme, 5 universities involved, 3 companies, including Rolls-Royce, involved, doing, it's going to be the world's first high-resolution simulation of a gas turbine engine in operation. We're about halfway through the project at the moment. But in truth, although these large projects do happen, actually they are very uncommon compared to the majority of industry projects that are much, much smaller. And I've always felt the most value I can add and my organisation can add into our local economy is working with the companies around us, which traditionally are small to medium-sized enterprises. So typical projects that we would do are here are some examples, and they really are extremely broad. Now, this first project here, I must admit that the small company involved, unfortunately, has closed down since we did the project, and I actually added this one in. We did a really, really good and interesting project with them, where we took their petrophysical software, effectively from it's an oil industry company, and we helped them optimize it so that the time it ran, which did take 7 days at one point, was down to a matter of minutes. Really, really good piece of work. Unfortunately, the company closed down. I think that's an important point. When we're dealing with small companies, you have to be aware that occasionally companies will close down or be bought. Now, in fact, recently the software has just been transferred to a new company, so the work that we did is actually going to have a life after this. But if you're an HPC centre, you've got to be aware that occasionally companies will disappear. Sustainably is a little company in Scotland where they came to us and said they were designing a new software product, and could they get us to help them with how to create the data architecture for their new software product and the software architecture. And this was a very little piece of work for us. I think it was a couple of months' work in total, and we helped them basically through the design process, which they then went on and implemented. So that's an example of a few years ago we wouldn't have done a project like that, but it's a very valid project for us to have done. We've got lots of experience in software architecture and data architecture development, and we are happy to do a project that helps sustainably with their problem. Deep Miner, obviously it's a text mining company, if I remember correctly. Again, that was software development just prior to their product launch. Each of these involved some use of our computer systems, but predominantly here we were doing software development. And then ALP is a company, Artificial Lift Performance, what it stands for, again, in the oil industry. And here we were using machine learning to enable performance of one of their systems to be predicted. And you know, I think there are lots of interesting problems around this area. This is one of the areas I think about AI is in the academic context. When people talk about AI research, they're really talking about the development of AI. I think there are a huge number of projects that can be done in what I call practitioner AI. So taking what's developed in the research space and applying it to real problems. And I think that's really what Fortissimo has always been about. It's always been about taking the technologies that are developed in the academic sector or commercially and applying them to solve people's problems. GSI is a company that we've worked with for many years, and basically what we provide for them is a data processing facility on our Cirrus HPC infrastructure, where they do all of their data processing and they host a number of data products on the system, which this is an example of a situation where we couldn't have done this in the national service, but we don't just provide them with access to Cirrus, we also provide them with a virtual machine infrastructure that allows them to host the data serving part of their business. And then finally, DJ Alexander, again, focusing on helping them with their data and software architecture for a new online product offering that they were making. So a very wide range of local SME projects, and you know, I've got a small commercial team, 2 people involved in it, and they just respond to requests. They go out and meet people, and they bring projects into us. Most of these projects have simply been paid for by the company involved. Occasionally, we've had some local enterprise funding from the government to support it. So, you know, you could say, given that, you know, we clearly managed to bring in projects in this way, what's the problem with regard to high performance computing, high performance data analytics and AI? And I think we do still see, and we've seen this throughout the history of Fortissimo, and in fact over the last 20, 30 years, that many more companies could be making use of high performance computing in all its guises than do at the moment. And I think one of the key things that puts companies off is that the first project, particularly in high performance computing, in traditional modeling simulation, can easily cost 60 to 100,000 euros, simply because you've got to work out maybe the model of the thing you want to model. You may have to develop some software. It can be really quite a complicated process. And you know, these amounts of money are really quite a large amount of money from an SME who hasn't seen the business benefits. At the same time, we know that many SMEs worry about lack of skills, that they're simply not going to have the skills within their business to make use of whatever is developed after the end of the project. So Fortissimo is really set up to challenge these things. You know, we wanted to demonstrate to companies that regional and national HPC centres could solve real business challenges and help companies develop their use of these interesting and important technologies in their day-to-day businesses. And you know, as was described in the first talk, we focused this around doing these experiments, these quite small projects where we took a business challenge, helped the business solve it, often ran the simulation or the data analytics on one of the supercomputers or HPC systems that we each of us ran, and hopefully solved the company's problem. And then, you know, we talk all the time in Fortissimo about the generation of success stories. And the reason we focus on that is there are a vast number of companies out there in Europe. And I think I once calculated that, in fact, you know, we had these 92 projects that ran as part of Fortissimo 1 and Fortissimo 2, and we got about 78 success stories out of them. But in fact, that means we only helped, I think it was 0.3% of all the businesses that we could have helped across Europe. So there's a vast opportunity for more companies to engage and be helped. Success stories give us a way of doing that, because a company can look at that, see another similar company or somebody with a similar problem has solved that problem, and find out how to access that solution. It also helps in a situation where, you know, the Participative projects have always been limited in the amount of money they have to give out on experiments, you know, and we hope, and we've seen in the past, that if that funding isn't available, simply because it's very limited, that companies will still engage and will adopt these technologies into their businesses. So there are many barriers to uptake. A couple, you know, I've covered the first couple, you know, that it may be very expensive. I think an important point, though, is I know that companies don't mind investing in their future, and that's how companies make money. They understand that. But one of the problems when my commercial team go out and talk to small companies, they're normally talking to a bit of the company that in the eyes of the managing director just costs money, often the research and development department, product development department. So you're already having to sell into a situation where the people you're selling to are going to have to go and ask their boss for money. So it can be quite often a difficult ask to get the company to spend money. A key barrier I've also mentioned is access to computing and software resources, but that's something that the FF4EuroHPC computing centres, the the Euro Competence Centres can help with. Access to expert help. You know, as I said before, companies worry that they don't have the in-house skills to adopt these technologies. And you know, if you look around the web, with the exception of Fortissimo in Europe and some of the activities in the US, largely pushed by an organisation called Castiel and Competence, there aren't a huge number of success stories for other companies to go and look at. And the whole point of Participative has been that it targets the third, fourth, and fifth barriers, so that the people that you're talking to in the R&D department can make a better case to their boss to invest in adopting the technology. That's really the idea behind Participative from the beginning. So as I said, Participative 1 and 2 focused around a set of experiments. They ran open calls, just like Participative for EuroHPC is about to, or is running at the moment. There are some differences between FF4EuroHPC and the first two Participative experiments projects. In Participative 1 and Participative 2, the experiments lasted 18 months, involved 3 to 5 partners, and we have funding up to 250,000. So if you are bidding to Participative 4 EuroHPC, make sure you understand exactly the constraints on the projects and the funding available. But the model is the same, that the new project is looking for a strong set of experiments across a broad set of areas. And a key outcome should be that you as a company, or the companies involved, are able to develop a success story which includes an understanding of the business benefit to your company. Of course, it's not just about the success story, it's also about solving the particular problem for the SME. So I've given these examples, or the next couple of examples, on many occasions. Of course, we did the big sexy example of an experiment. We worked with Koenigsegg. We also had another project with Lamborghini, and we helped both of them use CFD in sort of an on-demand basis. With Koenigsegg in particular, it was really a very impressive demonstration of the benefits of being able to go out and access resource on demand rather than have to buy their own system in-house. And there were really significant benefits to the company, which they calculated as part of their project. But I think I've always felt that the smaller projects, in fact, were more akin to the sort of projects that we really want to support. So here's a typical project with a company called IMR, where the company focuses on die casting of copper alloys. So you can see here, these are all taps and components for plumbing. And what IMR wanted to do was model the molds that are used to create the various components that they use in these copper products. So not huge savings, but 50k a year means the investment in the project, which I think got about just under 200,000 euros of funding, will easily be recouped in 3 or 4 years. Plus, more importantly, it introduced IMR into using modelling and simulation successfully for the first time in their business. I think that's an absolutely key part of all of this. And then this is a project with a company called Texa that was run in collaboration with Cinica, which is the Italian supercomputing centre. And I added this one in because it's a demonstration of a high-performance data analytics project. So this is the sort of project that you know is very common nowadays, but wouldn't have been common 10 years ago in this context. And in this particular context, it's effectively the predictive, the use of prediction software to predict when components are likely to fail in a large fleet of automotive vehicles. You know, I think if you go to the success story website, you can find out about this and many of the other success stories in more detail. And when you go to the website, you'll see there are a huge number of different examples. So Cape Horn Engineering with their design of yacht sails, HPE, not Hewlett Packard, but an Italian company with the same name, looking at additive manufacturing simulation, so 3D printing, modeling a small wind turbine microsites and designing them, and then HPDA used in crankshaft machining. So a huge variety of projects, and I think that's one of the key things about this, that there are an enormous number of different applications. So I wanted to finish with some comments on what we learned in the first 2 projects, and I think this is important in terms of people that you're thinking of bidding to the open call that's open at the moment. So the projects that really succeeded were the ones that properly planned their work from the start. So they talked in detail to the supercomputing centre they were intending working with, and really understood how the project would run, what its different work packages would be, and how they were delivered. You know, did they have the software in place, or was it going to have to be installed and purchased, or was it going to be developed, etc., etc. Whilst, you know, people also had to pick achievable projects. Now that led to some projects actually finishing sooner than expected, but they still achieved their aims, they still achieved the business benefits. So I was never unhappy about that. So you need to pick an achievable project that's not too small and not too large. Some of the largest projects that we funded got into difficulties because they tried to do or tried to tackle too difficult a problem. Another area that you need to be aware of is that you've got to make sure at the outset that you understand what software will be required, understand how it will be developed. And in some cases we had issues around access to software, so do make sure that you've got all of that. And then for each experiment proposal, a clear business case. What is the business benefits over the subsequent 3 to 5 years? You know, make sure that it does make financial sense, so that, you know, the key is, in each success story, you should be able to use that if you're a company to go and decide that it makes sense for you to invest your own money as a company in the project, because you can see the business benefits. And then finally, the best experiments definitely planned how to go from the initial experiment to production use from the outset. None of these experiments should be seen as an experiment that's done and then forgotten about. There should be a plan to take them forward in some production way, going, you know, in the future. So some advice to the HPC centres. Those that did really well were the ones that worked very closely with their experiment partners to develop the proposal. Where that hadn't happened from the outset, those are the projects that were challenging. To properly understand how much effort will be required, and also how the super community centre will start the project. And I think, you know, it was the centres that did really well were also able to guide and help the experiment partners to develop a clearly understood business model that everybody was happy with. And I think, you know, one of the things we learned was that the SMEs, not all of them were particularly good at developing business models in terms of, you know, working out how much an investment would cost and then what its return would be over time. And I think that was something we learned. It was a bit surprising to learn that, but we learned that, and I think it was an important learning. I would encourage the HPC centres to be involved, that are involved, to, if a project uses more high performance computing resource than it initially expected to, be pragmatic. It's more important that the project succeeds than you know, you worry too much about the amount of time. And it's really important that there's a responsive project management team in each centre. So in conclusion, I think FF4EuroHPC, you know, provides a really excellent opportunity to take forward the work that's happened in the first two Fortissimo projects. I think it's really, really great that it's broader than it was, that it's got this AI focus. I think there's a huge amount of projects that can be done there that are really, really interesting, and where small companies are crying out for help in looking at how they implement AI, both deep learning and machine learning, into their businesses. I think it's a really great way for national and regional HPC centres to engage with companies and grow services to their local industry. It's something that EPCC has done now for 30 years, and EPCC wouldn't exist if we hadn't done this. And you know, as I hope I've shown and we will show in the final two talks, there really are big and demonstrable business benefits for European businesses. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for this detailed presentation with a lot of examples that help, especially me also, to see again how wide a range of different SMEs can participate. Thank you again, Mark. And for the next presentation, there was also a small change in the presenter. So Mr. Will Bateman won't be able to join us today, but luckily we have Mr. Sam Ward here, who is the head of research and development from Cyber. And Cyber was is an SME that participated in the former Fortissimo projects, and they were able to create a success story of cloud-based optimization of a multi-body wave energy device. So they developed an innovative wave energy converter, which is called C-Cell, that harnesses power from ocean waves. And this experiment utilized cloud-based HPC resources and open source software to simulate all key aspects of C-Cell, which involve foundation, a floating platform, and the C-Cell device at nearshore locations. I'm very much looking forward to the presentation. So Mr. Sam Ward, if you would please start your presentation.
Thank you for having us. So as has been said, I'm Sam Ward, Head of Research and Development at C-Cell Renewables. Slight name change from Zyber, but it's the same company. I'm going to go through in this presentation a bit of background about what C-Cell is, what the problem is we're trying to solve, what our product is, and how we achieve our goals. And then I'm going to go through the case studies of how we've used HPC to optimize and design our solution. So C-Cell, we're a UK-based engineering company. We focus on smart, nature-based solutions to the problems of coastal erosion and coral restoration. So coastal erosion is a huge problem. This is 2 satellite images from the same hotel in Mexico. It's right in the heart of a key tourist area on the Yucatan Peninsula. And back in 2017, you can see they had a huge beach outside their hotel, which is really attractive to tourists. And their room rates and their income will have been really high as a result of this. In the past, just 2 years, you can see to 2019 on the right-hand side, they've lost almost 50 meters of beach due to increased coastal erosion. They're now relying on sandbags and other ineffective, expensive solutions like nourishment, where you essentially just dump extra sand onto the beach, which then gets washed away again. They're relying on these solutions to protect what little beach they have left, and ultimately the structure of their building, which has now come under threat. So this really powerful example is a specific case of what is a global problem. Around the world, 70% of all the coastlines are experiencing increased erosion now because of climate change. And climate change is driving an increase in wave energy, which is what's causing this erosion. So over the past 60 years, globally, we've seen 25% increase in wave energy. In some areas, you can see from this map, that's up to 2.5% per year, which is obviously a huge increase in wave energy and results in a huge increase in erosion. Thankfully, nature already has a solution to this problem, and it's in the form of coral reefs. So where coral reefs exist naturally, they can reduce the energy in waves that pass over them by an average of 97%, which obviously protects the coastline that's behind them. And in this way, over 200 million people and about 170 billion pounds worth of capital, so buildings, etc., are protected worldwide by coral reefs. So it's obviously hugely beneficial for humans worldwide, but they also provide a sanctuary and a birthplace for 25% of marine species. So natural coral reefs, they're hugely beneficial for both coastal erosion and also marine life, but unfortunately they themselves are under threat from climate change. They're being threatened by bleaching, by pollution, and by the increased severity of storms due to climate change. So nature has a solution already, but that solution is under threat. And what we're trying to do at CCEL is we're trying to mimic the natural solution in a smart, engineered way. So we're trying to build artificial reefs offshore that mimic natural coral reefs. They provide the coastal protection. They also restore the marine environment, so they give fish a place to live, but they're also smart and engineered in the sense that they can monitor the marine environment, capturing information, monitoring health, and providing data for research and other applications. How we do this, we start with a steel mesh structure, which we put on the seafloor, and we then provide a safe low voltage to this structure. This drives a chemical reaction in the seawater, which causes limestone rock to grow essentially around the steel bars. So the image you can see in the top left is a cutout from one of these reefs with about 6 months worth of rock growth on it. And this rock that grows is actually the same material that coral in nature form their exoskeletons from, but it grows orders of magnitude faster than corals can grow it themselves. So in building these reefs, we provide a natural backbone on which corals can grow and create a natural seeming coral reef that's been grown artificially and engineered. Obviously, to do this, I mentioned we provide power to the reef. So to provide power, we need to generate the power or otherwise supply it to the reef. And we're trying to do this by renewable energy. So I've got three possible solutions there: solar, wave, and wind. And the first application of high performance computing that I'm going to talk about today is focusing on the wave energy source. So CCEL as a company has developed our own wave paddle, which consists, as you can see here, of a big yellow glass fiber structure which sits just near the water surface. It's linked to a support structure and a power takeoff system, that's the PTO. And as the waves come by, the paddle flaps back and forwards, drives hydraulics through the PTO, which drives the generator and produces electricity. This electricity is then hooked up to the reef and it causes the rock to grow. This paddle design is an early stage design that you can see before we took on the high performance computing approach. And what we wanted to do with the computing was optimize the shape, essentially. You may know that typically wave energy isn't particularly cost effective when you compare it to solar and wind. But what we were trying to do here was optimize the shape, so reduce the weight and reduce the cost and increase the amount of energy that it was able to capture. And the way we did this was by producing computer models and using these models to try different shape designs and assess their performance. So this is a little video from one of the models that we're able to produce, and they're incredibly complicated. So they're really, really computationally expensive because you have to combine the generation of the wave to begin with, which isn't straightforward when you're looking at large waves like this. You need to account for the motion of the paddle itself and how it interacts with the wave, and you have a moving mesh, which is very computationally expensive. It's also then modeling how that's coupled to the power takeoff system itself, so that we can assess how much energy is generated in a certain configuration, again adding to the complexity. And what we find is that this kind of simulation isn't really possible with your standard computer or even a particularly powerful desktop PC that you just buy off the shelf. This is the kind of thing where we needed to turn to a high performance computing cluster to get simulations done, especially as what we wanted to do was optimize the shape, as I said, by trying different shapes, trial and improvement. So putting a shape into a model, running the model, assessing the results, and building upon that. So this was the first use of HPC that we did, and as a result, we optimized the shape from the one you saw before to something that looks more like the shape on the right. You can see it's a much more complicated structure. It's got more curves. It's starting to look more now like something you'd see on a boat or even in nature itself, the shape of fish's fins, etc. And this kind of optimized shape came about as a result of the ability to assess lots of different designs quickly using the high performance computing on what is a very, very expensive and difficult model to put together. So that was a success story for us of high performance computing and our wave energy generator. But as I mentioned, there's multiple aspects to what we do, and we're fortunately able to use the high performance computing capability in quite a lot of them. So the other key aspect, obviously, once we've produced the power, is using it to protect the shoreline. So top left here, we've got a schematic of how smaller waves generally propagate towards the shore. The motions in the waves don't penetrate very far down. They move towards the shore and then they break gently onto the shore, and small waves actually carry sediment, carry sand up and push it up to the shore and build up a beach. And this is what we want. We want small waves. On the top right is a schematic of what's happening when bigger waves get close to shore. And this is what we want to avoid. When large waves break, they break aggressively onto the shoreline and they disrupt the sand that's there, and then they drag it back out to sea. And large waves breaking onto shore is what's causing a lot of the erosion we're seeing in the globe. So on the bottom is a schematic of how one might design a reef to protect this. And what we're aiming to do is position our structures far away from shore so that they can cause the wave to break or reduce energy in the wave while it's not at the beach, and then allow the smaller waves to propagate towards the shore, as we said we wanted. What you traditionally see in coastal protection is more solid barriers that people will put either on the shore or breakwaters off the shore, which completely block the waves. So it's obviously it is going to protect the shoreline, and you do see that. But what having a submerged reef does is offer two advantages. The first is that the structure itself doesn't see as big loading from the waves, so the waves can kind of trip themselves up as they pass over, break onto themselves and dissipate energy that way, rather than just colliding against the structure, which means that our structure doesn't need to be as heavy. And the second benefit is that having it submerged actually allows the waves to bring sand over the top of them and deposit it on the shoreward side. And this is the first thing that high performance computing has enabled us to look at, is sediment transport in a very detailed way. So the simulation I'm showing you here is a smooth particle hydrodynamics simulation of 2 reef designs. And what it's showing is that when you have a solid barrier in the top simulation, the sand is essentially blocked from getting over the reef, but the waves are stopped. In the bottom simulation, what you see is that the waves are still caused to break. You get a similar pattern of wave breaking, but you get much more sediment allowed to travel over the top. And this kind of simulation, you're modeling tiny particles of sand being transported in the water, and there's up to millions of little particles that we're modeling in this simulation, and it can only really be done on very, very powerful machines. But what you can hopefully see from this is that the results are very, very powerful visualizations of what we're trying to show in our reef design, that we want our reef to be submerged because the sand can get over the top whilst it still breaks the waves. So that is a second success of high performance computing that we've had. What we also try to do with our reefs, as well as making them submerged, is making them porous. Obviously, this is again trying to mimic what's going on in the natural environment. Reefs aren't solid blocks of concrete; they're very complicated structures. There are lots of passageways through them that fish can find shelter in. But what this also does is cause turbulence as the water tries to flow through it, which again dissipates energy, reduces the energy in the wave, and protects the shoreline. So when we want to look at this kind of wave energy reduction, we run into another problem which needs solving through high performance computing. So what I've got on the screen at the moment is the kind of model we need to run to be able to predict the performance of a porous reef under waves. So the top image shows the full domain, which is about 200 meters in length. And we need this size of domain because it allows us to generate the waves on the left-hand side. It gives them a chance to propagate over the reef, and then it gives us time afterwards to see the effect that the reef has had on the waves. And the wavelengths are of the order of 30 to 50 meters. So we really need a very big domain to be able to see multiple waves pass over. At the same time, as I said, we also want to be able to look at the flow of water through the reef and how that induces turbulence and reduces the energy in the wave. And in order to do that in the same model, you need thousands and thousands of cells. This is an open foam, which is open source computational fluid dynamics software model. As I said, thousands up to 200,000 cells in one of these domains, and you can see why, because that tiny yellow square in the top image, when you zoom it in twice, this is the kind of flow that we see under these waves when it's passing through the reef. And in order to resolve that, you need a very high performance computer. What having these simulations enables us to do is really optimize where we put the reef and how porous we make it and how big we make it and what shape we make it. And without these simulations, we'd be largely guessing. And that's, to be honest, what a lot of coastal protection engineering has been up till now, has been largely guesswork of just putting something in the sea and hoping it gets in the way of the waves. This has enabled us to not only gain confidence that our structures are going to perform well, but also save a lot of cost and a lot of design weight and effort by optimizing the shape of the structure to reduce the energy in the waves as well as possible. So as I mentioned earlier, a big advantage of having our reefs submerged is that they don't see as big forces as a solid structure would. But a lot of the places where we're putting these see very large storms and hurricanes that pass over. So our reef needs to be designed to be strong enough to withstand these, as well as having an effect on the waves. And in order to predict the maximum forces that one of our reefs is going to see, we need to be able to simulate the conditions under these storms. And that leads us into another application of high performance computing that we've come across, which is in modeling hurricanes and the storm surge that they produce. So again, this is a video of an open foam model. This time we're looking on a much bigger scale. So you might recognize this as the Gulf of Mexico. The black areas in these plots are land. So you've got the Yucatan Peninsula at the bottom right. The south coast of the US is the northern boundary, and Mexico is up the left-hand side of these. So we're simulating thousands of kilometers squares area. And obviously in order to do that, you need, again, lots of cells, and you're modeling the movement of large amounts of water under a hurricane. We found that typically hurricanes take about 5 days to pass over the region of interest. So you're also modeling this large area for a long time. You know, when we're looking at waves, we're looking at the order of seconds to minutes in terms of how long they take to propagate towards shore, whereas here we're looking at days. So again, this is a situation where we could just about run one of these models on what I'm calling a standard computer. Even a standard computer for us is quite powerful compared to the stuff you see normally. And on one of those computers, it's taking up to a day to simulate one hurricane path, which is what's shown on the screen, which is fine. But what we wanted to be able to do was not only model hurricanes that have been in the past, but be able to predict what we think is going to happen in the future in terms of the maximum forces that our structure is going to see. So in order to do that, we needed to do some statistical analysis, which, as you probably appreciate, requires lots of data. And that lots of data comes from running, rather than one of these models, running hundreds of them with all the historical hurricanes that we have data for, and then making predictions based on that. So by using high performance computing here, we're able to parallelize the runs, so split them up into smaller chunks, which can each run on a processor core. OpenFOAM is very good at then managing the boundaries between those areas and running them all at the same time. It reduces the run times down from roughly a day to maybe 30 minutes to an hour to run one model. We then, as I said, we wanted to run more than 100 to get a good sample of historic hurricanes. And as you can see, by using high performance computing, instead of taking almost half a year to do that, it takes less than 100 hours, so less than a week. And that allows us to produce a plot like what you see on the right-hand side here, where we're just plotting the storm surge that we saw in a simulation for a certain area against how often it occurred in our set of simulations. Each dot on that graph represents the results of one model, one run. So normally it would take 1 day to produce one dot. With high performance computing, we can get this whole graph in less than a week. And as a result, we can, that red line is a best fit line using some statistical modeling, which we can then use to make predictions about the future. With that, then we can obviously optimize the structural design of our reef, again, enabling us to save money on materials, whilst giving us the confidence that these structures that we put in the sea are fit for purpose and are gonna survive as long as natural coral reefs do. So hopefully that's given you a bit of a background of what we do, why we do it, crucially, and how we've used high performance computing to really optimize what we do, in terms of both the design of the paddle, in terms of making sure our reefs protect the coastline well and they reduce the energy in the waves as well as they can, and as I've just said, making sure that they last for the long term. Thank you very much for listening, and I think we're taking questions after everyone's presented. Is that right? But I'm happy to answer anything.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Sam, for this presentation. It was very interesting, and thank you also for showing us what important work CSAL is actually doing. Okay, well, we will collect all the questions. So afterwards, after our last presentation, you can address the presenter and then just ask your question. The last presenter for today is Tommy Elias, who is the CEO of Actua. He will talk to us about the open calls in FF4EuroHPC. As I mentioned, within the FF4EuroHPC, we will have 2 open calls that will be offered, targeting the highest quality experiments involving innovative and agile small and medium-sized enterprises who have a work plan built around innovation targets arising from the use of advanced HPC services. The first open call is already open, and in the presentation of Mr. Tommy Elias, we will have all the information about it.
Great.
So
Thank you, Jessica, for introducing me. My role is to introduce you the open call. First couple of slides. I will just go very briefly through the Fortissimo for EuroHPC project again. It was already told that this is the third project of the flagship Fortissimo group of projects. Flagship because this is one of the few projects which is mentioned always in the strategies in EuroHPC and also other let's say documents in European Commission. It's so important to take care about SMEs, to bring them to a certain level when they can start using HPC by themselves. You see the information about the project here. The aims of the projects were already introduced. Important is that we're really aiming to increase the innovation potential, providing access of HPC-based infrastructures and services, foster wider innovations, etc., etc. So this is very, very important, and SMEs is one of the words which are important as well. Here you see the short, let's say, analysis of the benefits of high-performance computing in business. Among our projects, we have done a little bit of analysis as well, and the results were pretty much the same. So time to solution, reduced cost, return of investment, improvement in quality, or as we have seen in many times that it's completely impossible to solve the problem by any other means. Without supercomputer, many problems nowadays cannot be solved. So the mission. So it's also, you've seen that Fortissimo FF4EuroHPC, it's one of the projects within the EuroHPC program, and it is important also to support EuroHPC and promote the industrial uptake of HPC technologies. This is one of the aims, and SMEs are so important to the Europe and manufacturing SMEs especially, that we really have focus on this. So what are the objectives of the open call? We will have 2 open calls. The first one is published. The due date is end of January. And these are main objectives. Experiments should really address the business challenges, and European SMEs. Eligible are also SMEs outside Europe, you know, because the general Horizon 2020 rules applies, but the main objectives are European SMEs. The preference is given to engineering and manufacturing, but other sectors are eligible as well, but they should be able to demonstrate the fast economic growth or particular economic impact for Europe. Priority, should be centered on SME, which is new to the use of advanced HPC services. So this is very important. We would like to welcome newcomers. We know we have many success stories within the Europe from previous Fortissimo projects or some other projects, but we are searching for newcomers. So this, I think, it's very important. Another one which is very important, it's expectations for experiments. It should involve all necessary parties. Usually we are talking about SME as a core, and then you have a HPC center as a partner or even subcontractor, and then as a supplier. And then usually in previous experiments we had academia or let's say domain experts from universities, institutes, or other let's say entities, and sometimes software experts, independent software vendors were involved as well. So it should be, you know, it should be the whole you know, necessary parties. Budget, it's very important. You know that you are limited on 200K. And you may know that the huge difference between this open call and the previous open call is that the EuroHPC core partners are not in the position to provide computing resources. So what in the past was must be, now it's not anymore. So you choose your HPC center and you choose your HPC provider. One of the important things is that we would like to share the success stories, as this is very important for the impact of all what we do. So we should have publishable success material, success story material to publish it in our web page and books, whatever we had in mind. Important, the very important is the last bullet. So it's please be complementary to those experiments, to those success stories which were already included in the past Fortissimo projects. It's all on the web page. Please go and check all the experiments, and if you find one which is very, very similar to what you want to do, probably it's not a good idea to apply, or I mean definitely the impact will be scored lower. So please go through it and search for new sectors, new ways of new simulations, new ways of doing things, new business models, whatever. These are key details of the call. End of January, the funding, as I said, is 3 million euros, and we are expecting that around 15 experiments will be funded. Duration is up to 15 months. The start date probably 1st of June. And you have a electronic submission, and you have a link on the web page where you can easily submit your proposal. The proposal consists from 2 parts. It's part A, part B, maximum 10 pages. Please do not go over the page limit, and be careful to fill all the necessary data, because we'll have probably lots of submissions, and we will have to be strict on what we requested. So criteria are pretty much as always. You have 4 criteria, which first criteria impact, it has a ponder of 2, a weight of 2. So in total, each criteria has 5 points. The first one 10 points. So you see we have 25 points in total. You have lots of frequently asked questions and answers and questions, sorry, in our webpage. Go through all the success stories already done in Fortissimo, and please check the frequently asked questions. If you don't find one, post it to us and we will reply.